we're giving $3,600,000 to Haiti for pastry cooking classes, for cyber cafes, for dance focus groups, for male prostitutes. The president's saying, I don't think so. I don't think that the American people support giving their hard-earned money to male prostitutes in Haiti. So he's asking us to cut it out. I want to talk about just a few subjects briefly today, in no particular order. I want to talk first about Russia and the war with Ukraine. Now, regardless of how you feel about the war in Ukraine, I think most fair-minded people can agree on two things. Number one, Vladimir Putin, who runs Russia, not the people of Russia, but their leadership, is a thug. He's a pirate. He has blood under his fingernails. He can't be trusted. And the second thing that I think most fair-minded Americans can agree on is that we would all like to see the war ended. President Trump has tried. And frankly, President Putin has treated our president, as I've said before on the Senate floor, Putin has treated our president like President Trump has taken the bullet train to Chump Town. He says all the right things when he talks to our president, and then he does the opposite. And I think he's disrespected America. He meaning President Putin. And I think he's disrespected President Trump. I think Ukraine is willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement. But it takes two to tango, and we're not going to have a settlement until President Putin decides it is in his best interest to stop the war. Not Russia's best interest, because I don't think he cares about his people. I think the war will stop when Putin thinks it's in his best interest. And I don't think he's going to think it's in his best interest until he feels the pressure, Mr. President. Because dealing with Putin is like dealing with most tyrants. It's like hand-feeding a shark. Okay? You can't reason with them. You have to make them feel the pain. A lot of people think of Russia and think of Putin as this gigantic country with a lot of wealth and power, and that's not really the case, Mr. President. Yes, they have nuclear weapons, but actually the Russian economy is pretty small. The Russian economy, for example, the European economy is about $50 trillion. That's their GDP. The Russian economy is only about $2 trillion. New York State in America has a bigger economy than Russia. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Russia's economy is also not terribly diversified. It's mostly oil. Putin relies on oil revenues for about a third of his budget. Now, why am I saying all this? Because the Russian economy is not in great shape, Mr. President. They're spending almost all of their money, about 7% of their GDP, to fuel their war machine. And the Russian economy wasn't that great, frankly, to begin with. And if you sit down and just look at the numbers and the statistics, you will see that the Russian economy, at one point, inflation was through the roof. At one point, I think they had 21% inflation. I think if you look at the Russian economy, you'll see that many of the commentators in Russia think that, and this is coming from the Russian commentators, not from others. They think that Russia might be on the verge of going into a recession. And if you look at the numbers coming out of Russia, you will see that manufacturing in Russia is declining. You will see a lot of the consumers, ordinary people in Russia, tightening their belts. Inflation, which I alluded to, Mr. President, remains high. And the Russian budget is strained. The price of oil is down. Remember, I said Putin depends on oil for about 30% to a third of his revenue, and the price of oil is down. Their growth model in Russia, their model of sustenance, is based on the war, and they're starting to feel the effects of that. For example, in the first quarter of this year, the Russian GDP grew 1.4%. You might be thinking, well, that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. The fourth quarter of 2024, though, if you look at the numbers, the Russian economy grew 4.5%. So clearly it's slowing. And once again, remember I said the Russian economy is based on oil. Why is it slowing? Well, number one, the price of oil is down. We know that. Number two, Russia is spending all of its money fighting the war with Ukraine, which has hurt other parts of its economy. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. President, when you're dealing with a tyrant like Putin and you're trying to bring him to the negotiating table, what you have to do is get him down and choke him. And the way to get President Putin down and choke him is through his cash flow. Putin, and remember, I'm not talking about the good people of Russia. I'm talking about their leadership. I'm talking about Vladimir Putin, the thug. Putin is only able to prosecute his war through cash flow generated by his sale of oil. That's the only way. Without that cash flow from oil, he can't continue. We need to cut off his money. We need to cut off his sale of oil. Now, we already have sanctions on Russia, and Europe has sanctions on Russia. But Russia has figured out how to evade those sanctions and continue to sell its oil. For example, India is buying a lot of Russia's oil. China is buying a lot of Russia's oil. But we can stop that. We have a bill, 87 of us have signed on, that would apply what's called secondary sanctions on Russia. And our bill would not only sanction Russia and its sale of oil, but it would sanction everybody who buys Russian oil. Big difference. Big difference. It would say to those who want to buy Russian oil, if you want to buy Russian oil, have at it. Knock yourself out. But you're not going to be able to do business with America. And you're not going to be able to use the American dollar, which is the world's currency, to do business in America. It will put Putin on his knees within 3 months. And he won't have any choice but to come to the bargaining table. Now, President Trump's been very patient. President Biden, he wasn't patient. He was giving. I remember when President Biden said to Putin, well, you know, we don't want you to go into Ukraine, but if it's just a little excursion, it might be okay. I remember that. What do you think Putin did? Remember, hand feeding a shark? He went right into Ukraine. President Trump, on the other hand, has really tried to be rational and negotiate with Putin and say, look, we need to have an amicable solution to satisfy both sides. Ukraine is willing. Putin has done nothing but embarrass our president and our country. The time has come to put Russia on its knees. And I hate to see it for the Russian people, but the time has come to put Putin on his knees. Get him down and choke him. And the only way you're going to do that is cut off his cash flow. And the only way you're going to cut off his cash flow is to cut off his oil sales, because that's at least a third and probably 40% of his money. We have no choice. Otherwise, this war could go on forever. Now, we have the bill locked, loaded, ready to go. We're waiting for President Trump to give us the high sign, because we want to stay together. The president's the one trying to negotiate the peace. But I hope President Trump will seriously consider letting us pull the trigger, because it's the only thing that's going to get Vladimir Putin to the table. I wish the world weren't like that. There's just some people, I don't know why I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask, but there's some people in this world, they're not sick, they're not misunderstood, they're not mixed up. It's not really that their mom or daddy didn't love them enough. They're just bad people. They are. And some of them run countries. And one of them is Vladimir Putin. So let's go do what we have to do. Let me say another word quickly about the reconciliation bill. You're going to hear so much about this, Mr. President. I've already heard a lot that the reconciliation bill that Congress passed it's going to kill people. People are going to die. It's only going to help rich people. None of that's true. None of that's true. The bill that we just passed is primarily a tax cut. And taxes are not terribly complicated. When you tax something, you get less of it. Right? You want to stop people wearing wristwatches? I love wristwatches. I've had this one for like 30 years. But you want to stop people from buying wristwatches? Just pass a bill and says every time you buy a wristwatch, you have to pay a $200 tax. Boy, that's going to be the end of wristwatches. Business is the same way. You want businesses not to expand? Tax the hell out of them so they don't have any money to reinvest in their business. You want people to work less? Tax them. Take all their money. People are rational. They'll go, well, why do I want to work an extra 10 hours this week? They're taxing me. The government's going to take all of my money. So our bill is a tax cut bill. That's all it was. We passed a tax cut back in 2017, as you know, Mr. President. Those tax cuts would have expired at the end of this year. If we hadn't passed this bill, taxes on the American people would have gone up $4.3 trillion. Not billion, $4.3 trillion. It would have tanked our economy. Our economy would have gone down like a fat guy on a seesaw. And some of my friends say, oh, you cut taxes on the rich. That's not true. That's just a lie. I mean, well over half of the tax cuts that we extended go to ordinary Americans. Working people, working moms, working dads. So the first thing we did was extend the tax cuts. We avoided $4.3 trillion worth of taxes. And frankly, everybody who voted against our bill voted to raise taxes on the American people in the amount of $4.3 trillion. That's just a fact. Our bill did some other things, though. We added some new tax cuts. We cut taxes on tips. Now, not everybody who works for tips is going to get a tax cut, but most people are. We cut taxes on overtime. Most ordinary Americans work overtime. We cut their taxes on overtime. We cut taxes on Social Security income. We cut taxes on some car loans. We extended the child tax credit. $2,200 for every child. That's important for most Americans. We increased the standard deduction. We strengthened Medicaid. One of the things we did, there's this rhetoric, it's really a lie, but I'll call it rhetoric going around. Well, they're destroyed Medicaid. Medicaid's going to grow under our bill. It's just not going to grow as fast as it was. But 10 years from now, we'll be spending a minimum 20% more on Medicaid. Not less, more. You know the biggest change we made to Medicaid? Work requirement. Now, the American people are the most compassionate people in the world. If you're hungry, we'll feed you. If you're homeless, we'll house you. If you're too poor to be sick, we'll pay for your doctor. We're generous people. But those who can work should work. And we've got some people on Medicaid who are perfectly healthy. They're not disabled. They don't have young kids at home. I'm not talking about a mom with a sick child in her arms. They don't have minor children at home. They just don't want to work. They want to get Medicaid, but they don't want to work. Those who can't work should work. And all our bill does is say, look, you can still keep your Medicaid, but if you can work, not if you're disabled, not if you're elderly, not if you're in a nursing home, if you're a healthy adult at home playing video games, you got to go look for a job. And you got to work at least 20 hours a week. Not 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week. What's unreasonable about that? The other change, major change we made to Medicaid was some people, not most people, but some people when they sign up for Medicaid, they lie. They say, I'm only making $25,000 a year. Well, in fact, they might be making $75,000 or $100,000 a year. I'm not exaggerating. I've seen that happen. What we've told the states is twice a year for all of our folks on Medicaid, you got to check their eligibility. Make sure that they're not making more than they're supposed to, because Medicaid is not for everybody. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with saying to people, you're not entitled to Medicaid if you're not eligible? What's unreasonable about that? We're not killing people. We're trying to save Medicaid so that we can afford it for people who really need it. The other two things this bill did, and then I'll move on quickly to my other subject. It provided more money for border enforcement. Now, I know there are many people in America and there are many people in the Senate who believe in open borders. I respect that. They may not say it, but they do. They just think the border ought to be wide open, and they think that if you believe in secure borders, you're a racist. I don't agree with them, but this is America. They're entitled to their opinion. Most Americans don't think that. Most Americans want the border to be secure. They want to know who's coming in and out of their country. And this bill is going to provide the money to do that. The other part of our bill, as you know, Mr. President, provides much needed money for our military. Because we live in a dangerous world, and I wish we didn't, but we do. And weakness invites the wolves. Final thing I want to say, Mr. President, next week, President Trump's going to send us over what's called a rescission bill. What does that mean? Well, we've got a $7 trillion budget, okay? I don't know how much of that $7 trillion is waste, but every fair-minded person would have to agree that there's some money being spent in that $7 trillion that shouldn't be spent. It just shouldn't. It's wasted money. And so President Trump and this Congress made one of its objectives trying to reduce spending. Not spending that we need to reduce, but spending that needs to be reduced. I call it spending porn. And the president has sent us a bill. He's saying to Congress, I want you to reduce spending in the current budget by $9.1 billion. And let me tell you what the spending, what constitutes the spending I want to reduce. Well, first, $9.1 billion out of a $7 trillion budget, we're not talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about 1/10 of 1%. That's all. That's point one. Point two, you need to look at what the president's asking us to cut out. I'll just give you a couple of examples. I didn't make this up. The president is saying we're giving $3 million to Iraq to produce Sesame Street. Maybe we could use that money for something else. The president is saying we're giving $3 million to Zambia for circumcisions and vasectomies. The president's saying we don't need to do that. We've got other priorities. We're giving $500,000 to Rwanda to buy electric buses. The president is saying to us, Congress, we don't need to be spending the money on that. There are more important things. We're spending $67,000 to give insect powder to kids in Madagascar. I don't even know what insect powder is, but the president's asking us to cut it out. We're giving $3,600,000 to Haiti for pastry cooking classes, for cyber cafes, for dance focus groups, for male prostitutes. The president's saying, I don't think so. I don't think that the American people support giving their hard-earned money to male prostitutes in Haiti. So he's asking us to cut it out. He's asking us to reduce the budget by $833,000 because some of President Biden's bureaucrats gave a contract to transgender people, sex workers, and their clients in Nepal. The president's saying, I don't want to do that. And he's right. That's enough. You get the idea. That's why I call it spending porn. Triggers your gag reflex. You look at this stuff and you go, what in God's name? Who decided to do this? Well, Congress didn't. The bureaucrats did. It's money we appropriated, but we didn't tell them to go spend money, $833,000, and give to sex workers in Nepal. They just took the money we appropriated and used it for that. And so the president is asking us to do what's called a rescission, to cancel the spending. Now, I have listened, I've been here 8 years, Mr. President, and I've listened to a whole bunch of people talk about the need to reduce spending. But you got to watch what people do, not what they say. Because talk is cheap. And around here, I've learned pretty quickly that reducing spending, it's like going to heaven. I want to go to heaven. I bet you want to go to heaven, Mr. President. I bet our guests in the gallery want to go to heaven. But everybody wants to go to heaven. Raise your hand if you're ready to take the trip today. Most people, you are, sir, and I admire that. But most people want to live a little longer. And that's the way it is with reducing spending around here. I want to reduce spending. I support it, but not just yet. Because I've got this project. Well, and I've listened to that. And I've especially listened to it for the past 100 days. Go get them, President Trump. Reduce that spending. We're behind you 1,000%. Well, he has. He has. 0.1% he's asking us to reduce. And I'm not saying senators shouldn't ask questions and make some changes if they need to be made, but here's the bottom line. It is gut check time. It is gut check time. You either believe in reducing spending or you don't. And if you talk the game and say, let's reduce spending, and you vote against this bill, in my opinion, you ought to hide your head in a bag. Because you will be able to cut the hypocrisy with a knife. It's real, real hard, Mr. President, to preach temperance from a bar stool. It's gut check time. We need to pass this bill. I yield the floor, Mr. President.